In this new series, I'm talking about Suddenly Something Clicked, a new book by Walter Murch, a legendary filmmaker, film editor. I had the pleasure of interviewing him 3 times in my life, one of the greatest honors, seriously. And in each episode, I'm gonna talk about one chapter from the book, about its insights and what you can learn from it. And the first chapter starts with a coincidental meeting of Walter Murch and George Lucas, just 3 weeks after Star Wars was released. They were on separate missions, but they decided to work together for some time and update each other on what's going on. And at one point when they were about to cross the street, they noticed Carl Schultz, who they both worked with in the past on American Graffiti and The Conversation. And they, waved to him, but he didn't react. And they were surprised, so they thought maybe we'll play a joke on him or something like that. But when they were approaching him and they were very close, they realized that it's not Carl Schultz, even though they were both convinced that it's him. And at this point, Walter switches the topic and talks about how human vision works, and that only a very small portion of our field of vision is in focus, even though we feel as if everything is in focus, right? So our brain is actually creating this very convincing reality when our eyes saccade from one focal point to another, and that's how it works. That's how we perceive that everything is in focus, even though in reality it's about a thumbnail when we extend our arm. But then he goes back to 1977 New York and talks about how they continued on their way with George Lucas and talked about how they were both convinced it must have been Carl Schultz. And a few streets later, they actually met Carl Schultz. Seriously, what a coincidence. And Walter talks about how it could have been, like why this happened. And there are a few possible explanations for that. It could be a pure coincidence, that's one explanation. The other one could be metaphysical, that there was some kind of subconscious wave traveling through New York in 1977 on that morning, and they just caught this wave, the presence of Carl Schultz in New York. And when they were presented with a man that would dress like him and looked a little bit like him, they kind of felt that it must be him. But the truth is kind of irrelevant, because he talks about all of this to ask a question. How much of a film is actually there, and how much of it is there because the audience expects it to be there? And if you think about it, it's a fascinating question. In my last interview with him, Walter mentions how cinema is this mass intimacy medium, where we feel as if we're doing it together, we're watching a film together, yet each one of us is filtering the film through our experience. And we may sometimes leave the theater with a friend who thinks that the film was about something completely different than we think it is. Anyway, it's a great first chapter of the book, and I can't wait to read the rest of it.